Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, September 1943. September 12, 1943. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The Allegheny County Health Department office sat in a brick building that smelled of coal dust and carbolic soap. Dr. Estelle Vogel, 32 years old, sat at her desk on the third floor, staring at the fourth emergency notification card of the day. Acute gastrointestinal illness, hospitalization, critical condition. All 4 patients came from the same neighborhood, Maple Ridge, houses between 14th and 22nd Street. Estelle set down her pencil and looked at the district map on her wall. Red pins marked disease cases from the past week, forming a tight cluster. 12 people, all from one place. This wasn't coincidence. This was an outbreak. And an outbreak meant somewhere in that quiet autumn neighborhood, a source was methodically, ruthlessly poisoning people. She'd spent 9 of her 32 years in public health service. During that time, she'd seen typhoid in a rural county, dysentery in a summer camp, cholera threats in immigrant neighborhoods. She'd learned to read a city like a book, where every outbreak told its story of filth, negligence, or criminal greed. But she didn't yet know this story would be the worst. That in 3 weeks she'd have to choose between her career and her conscience, and that the truth she'd find at the bottom of an old well would be more terrifying than any disease. Estelle stood from her desk, took her white coat from the rack, grabbed her medical bag. Her office on the third floor reeked of chlorine and formaldehyde, smells so deeply embedded in the walls they never aired out even with windows wide open in summer. She descended the stairs, past the reception desk where a duty nurse dozed over the logbook, and stepped outside. September in Pittsburgh was warm. The sun beat down with summer intensity. Victory gardens on the city's edges swelled with late vegetables before harvest, and the air hung thick with the sweet smell of overripe produce and industrial smoke. Estelle climbed into the department's Ford sedan, driven by Walter, a taciturn, gray-haired man who'd worked for the health department 20 years. "Maple Ridge," she said, "number 18. Walter nodded and started the engine. They drove in silence. Estelle watched through the window as streets filled with people, children playing in yards, women with shopping bags hurrying from the market. A normal city, alive, bustling, carefree. None of these people knew that somewhere nearby, death lurked in a water source, in something they trusted implicitly. Maple Ridge turned out to be a quiet street on the edge of the Lawrenceville district. Single-story houses with peeling paint, front yards with chrysanthemums and asters, fences of rough lumber. A poor neighborhood where steelworkers from the nearby mill lived, dock workers from the freight yards, seamstresses and cleaning ladies, people for whom a doctor's visit was a luxury, and calling an ambulance was a last resort. Number 18 stood unremarkable. Sagging fence, narrow yard with laundry lines. Estelle pushed through the gate. On the porch sat an elderly woman in a faded apron, peeling potatoes into a bowl. Her hands moved slowly, mechanically, her face gray and haggard. Quote 2. Estelle pulled out her credentials. Quote 3. The woman flinched, dropped her knife, looked at Estelle with fearful eyes. Quote 4. Quote 5. Quote 6. Inside, the house was clean but poor. Painted floor, a crucifix on the wall, table covered with oilcloth. It smelled of vegetable soup and something stale, sickly. Estelle sat on a wooden chair, pulled out her notebook. Dottie sat across from her, wringing her apron with gnarled hands. Dottie hesitated. They went into the yard. In the far corner, behind a shed, stood a well. Old, with a crooked wooden frame and a warped cover. Estelle approached, removed the cover. Inside led a dark, damp shaft. No smell, but Estelle had learned not to trust the absence of smell. The worst poisons kill without warning. Dottie looked away. Estelle pulled a sterile bottle from her bag, tied it to a rope, lowered it into the well. The water was cold, clear. To the eye, perfect. But Estelle knew the most dangerous contaminants were invisible. She sealed the bottle, recorded the address and collection time. Quote, 18. Quote, she said firmly. Quote, 19. Quote. Dottie nodded, but Estelle saw doubt in her eyes. Boiling meant burning coal, using fuel, wasting time. For a poor family, it was a luxury. The next 3 houses gave the same picture. Well in the yard, sick relatives, boiled water as an impossible recommendation. By evening, Estelle had 5 water samples and a clear understanding of the source. All the sick lived in houses using wells. Maple Ridge had no city water. People drank from the ground as their parents and grandparents had, and this water was killing them. But where did the contamination come from? Estelle returned to the health department after dark, climbed to the laboratory on the 4th floor. The lab technician, Marge, a thin woman with a tired face, still sat at her microscope. Estelle set the bottles on the table. Marge nodded without looking up from the eyepiece. Estelle stepped outside. The city was settling for the night. Sparse streetlights glowed, light and radio sounds poured from apartment windows. Somewhere a child played, somewhere neighbors argued. Life flowed on. And in hospitals lay 12 people whose bodies fought an unknown infection. Tomorrow there might be more. September 13th, morning. Estelle sat in the office of the health department director. Elwood Percival Whitmore, a heavy-set man with the face of a former Army officer and service medals on his chest, listened to her report silently, drumming his fingers on the desk. Estelle repeated. Whitmore nodded. Estelle left his office with a heavy feeling. Whitmore was a good director, an experienced public health officer, but he thought in terms of calm and control. And Estelle saw the map with red pins. She saw the outbreak's trajectory, and she knew sometimes infections don't get contained. Sometimes they explode. At noon, the test results came. Marge laid a thick folder of forms on Estelle's desk. Her face was pale. Have you seen this? Estelle asked. I've seen it. Vogel, this is very bad. Estelle opened the folder. First form, bacteriological analysis. E. coli at levels 50 times above normal. Enterococci, pathogenic flora. The water was contaminated with fecal matter. Classic source of intestinal infections. But that was expected. The terrifying part was something else. Second form, chemical analysis. Estelle scanned the lines and froze. Mercury concentration, 0.08 milligrams per liter with a standard of 0.0005. Lead, 0.15 milligrams per liter with a standard of 0.01. Copper, zinc, manganese, all off the charts. But the most terrifying was the last indicator. Arsenic, 0.5 milligrams per liter, with a permissible standard of 0.01. This wasn't just contaminated water. This was a cocktail of heavy metals and poison. People drinking this water for weeks, months, were getting chronic poisoning. Slow, invisible, cumulative. Mercury destroyed the nervous system. Lead, blood production. Arsenic, everything. Marge whispered. Estelle was silent. She looked at the map. Maple Ridge. Wells. What's nearby? She stood, approached the large city map on the wall, traced her finger. Maple Ridge bordered an industrial zone. Warehouses, workshops, small enterprises stood there. And one of them, Whitmore Chemical and Munitions Plant. Estelle felt cold in her stomach. The plant. Production waste. Dumping into the ground. Groundwater carried poison into wells. Classic scheme of industrial contamination. She'd seen this twice in her practice. But there, the guilty were quickly found and punished. They closed enterprises, fired directors, opened criminal cases. But this was 1943. America was at war. And Whitmore Chemical wasn't just any plant. It was a defense contractor. They made explosives for the Navy, chemical compounds for bombs, primers for artillery shells. War production ran 24 hours a day. The plant was protected by military security. Its director had connections in Washington. Estelle understood what this meant. She couldn't just walk in and demand an inspection. She couldn't shut down a war plant without proof solid as steel. And even with proof, she'd face a wall of resistance. But people were dying. 12 now. Tomorrow, maybe 20. The day after, 100. She made her decision. September 14th. Estelle stood at the gates of Whitmore Chemical, a high fence of barbed wire, guard posts, signs. Quote, 31. She showed her health department badge to the guard. The guard, a young man in a security uniform, looked uncertain. The guard picked up a telephone, spoke quietly, hung up. Quote, 35, quote. 20 minutes later, a man appeared. 40 years old, well-tailored suit, slicked hair, cold eyes. Theodore Carver, plant manager. Quote, 36, quote. Quote, 37, quote. Carver smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Doctor, we're producing materials vital to the war effort. Our waste management complies with all regulations. If there's a health problem in the neighborhood, perhaps you should look elsewhere. Old houses, poor sanitation, ignorant people not boiling their water. The contamination is chemical, not biological. Heavy metals don't come from poor sanitation. Nevertheless, I can't allow an inspection without proper authorization from military authorities. This plant operates under Navy contract. You'll need clearance from the War Production Board. That will take weeks. Then it takes weeks. Good day, doctor. He turned and walked back through the gates. The guard crossed his arms, blocking the entrance. Estelle stood there, fury rising in her chest. She understood the game. Bureaucratic delays, layers of military security. By the time she got clearance, more people would be sick, maybe dead. She returned to her car and drove to the county courthouse. She needed a judge to issue a search warrant. But which judge would rule against a defense contractor during wartime? Who would prioritize civilian health over war production? She spent the afternoon in courthouse corridors, talking to clerks, trying to file motions. Every door closed. Security concerns. War priorities. Come back with military authorization. By evening, she sat in her office, staring at the map. The red pins seemed to mock her. 13 now. A new case that afternoon. The telephone rang. She picked up. Vogel. Dr. Vogel, this is Whitmore. The director's voice was tight. Quote 48. Quote 49. Quote 50. Quote 51. Quote 52. Quote 53. Quote 54. Quote 55. Estelle gripped the phone. He hung up. Estelle sat in the darkness. Outside, the city lights dimmed according to blackout regulations. The war was everywhere. Even here, in her office, in her work. The war justified everything, even letting people die. She thought about Nina Pritchard, lying in a hospital bed, her insides burning from arsenic. About the 12 others. About the families who would get sick next. She made another decision. September 15th. Estelle drove to the offices of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. The newspaper building stood downtown, a fortress of brick and stone. She climbed to the newsroom on the 3rd floor. Typewriters clattered, telephones rang, reporters shouted across desks thick with cigarette smoke. She asked for Harvey Dalton. A secretary directed her to a desk in the corner. Harvey Dalton was a thin man in his 40s, sleeves rolled up, cigarette dangling from his lips. He looked up as she approached. Quote 59 Estelle sat. She laid her folder on his desk. She told him everything. The outbreak, the test results, Whitmore Chemical, the refusal to inspect, the bureaucratic walls. Dalton listened, taking notes. When she finished, he leaned back, eyes sharp. Quote 61, quote 62. Dalton studied her. Quote 63, quote 64, Quote 65. Quote 66. Dalton crushed his cigarette. September 16th. Estelle spent the day collecting evidence. She visited every sick household, took statements, gathered medical records. She photographed the wells, the neighborhood, the plant's perimeter fence. She compiled a dossier thick as a phone book. That evening, she received a visitor. A knock on her apartment door. She opened it to find a man in a dark suit, FBI badge in his hand. Dr. Vogel? Special Agent Brennan. I need to speak with you about a matter of national security. Her stomach dropped. Come in. Brennan sat in her small living room, hat on his knee, eyes cold. Dr. Vogel, we understand you've been making inquiries about Whitmore Chemical and Munitions. We also understand you've been in contact with the press. I'm here to advise you that such activities could be construed as interfering with war production. That's a serious matter. I'm investigating a public health crisis. You're making allegations against a vital defense contractor without sufficient evidence. In wartime, that borders on sabotage. Sabotage? People are being poisoned. So you say, but you have no direct proof linking the plant to the contamination. What you have is speculation. And publishing that speculation could damage morale, create labor unrest, slow production. Do you know how many bombs Whitmore Chemical makes every day? How many shells? Every hour of delay could cost American lives overseas. And what about American lives here? Don't they matter? Everything matters, doctor. But priorities exist. The war comes first. That's what everyone keeps telling me. Brennan stood. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to make you understand the situation. Drop this investigation. Focus on public health measures. Boil water, deliver clean water, educate the public. But leave Whitmore Chemical alone. That's in everyone's best interest. Including the people getting poisoned? They can boil their water. And the arsenic? The mercury? Boiling doesn't remove heavy metals. Brennan's jaw tightened. Quote 84 __. He left. Estelle sat in the dark, hands shaking. The FBI. They'd sent the FBI to intimidate her. This was bigger than she'd thought. Carver had powerful friends. But she'd already made her choice. September 18th. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette ran the story on the front page. Defense plant suspected in poisoning of dozen residents. Harvey Dalton's byline. Photos of the neighborhood, quotes from victims. Estelle's analysis results in black and white. The city exploded. By noon, the health department's phones rang off the hook. Reporters, concerned citizens, angry politicians. Whitmore's office was besieged with calls. The mayor issued a statement calling for a full investigation. The county commissioners demanded answers. Theodore Carver held a press conference. He stood before cameras, flanked by lawyers, and denied everything. These allegations are baseless and irresponsible. Whitmore Chemical operates under the strictest safety standards. We've been inspected and approved by military authorities. Dr. Vogel's so-called evidence is circumstantial at best. She has no proof our plant is responsible for any illness. This is a witch hunt that threatens vital war production. But the damage was done. Public pressure mounted. Within 2 days, the War Production Board ordered an independent inspection. Navy engineers arrived with testing equipment. They spent 3 days at the plant. Estelle received the report on September 22nd. She sat in Whitmore's office, along with the mayor, county attorney, and a Navy captain named Morrison. Morrison laid out the findings. Silence. The mayor spoke first. Morrison's face was hard. The Navy is terminating our contract with Whitmore Chemical effective immediately. Criminal charges will be filed against plant management for negligent endangerment. The facility will be shut down until proper waste treatment systems are installed. Carver's voice came from the doorway. He'd arrived uninvited, face flushed with rage. You can't shut us down. We're producing 30,000 pounds of explosives a week. You'll cripple the war effort. Morrison turned to him, ice in his eyes. "Mr. Carver, you've been poisoning American citizens, families, children. You cut corners to save money, put profit over safety, and lied about it. That's not supporting the war effort. That's treason. Get out before I have you arrested." Carver opened his mouth, closed it, turned and left. Estelle felt something loosen in her chest. Justice. Finally. But it wasn't over. September 25th. Estelle sat across from Elwood Whitmore in his office. The director's face was grave. "Vogel, I'll be direct. The mayor wants your resignation." "What?" "You went over my head. You leaked information to the press. You created a public crisis that shut down a defense plant. Yes, you were right about the contamination, but you violated protocol. You embarrassed powerful people. They want you gone." "I saved lives." "Maybe, but you also caused problems. The mayor's getting heat from Washington. They're angry about the plant shutdown, the bad publicity. Someone has to take the fall. That someone is you." Estelle stared at him. "You're firing me for doing my job." "I'm giving you the option to resign quietly. Keep your reputation intact. Otherwise, they'll dismiss you for insubordination, and you'll never work in public health again." "What about the truth? What about the people I helped?" Whitmore sighed. "The truth is complicated, Vogel. Yes, you exposed wrongdoing, but you also disrupted the chain of command, ignored security protocols, and caused political problems. In peacetime, maybe you'd be a hero, but we're at war. Different rules apply. So I should have let people die? You should have worked within the system. I tried. The system failed." Whitmore was silent for a long moment. "Maybe it did, but that doesn't change the situation. I'm sorry, Estelle. You're a good doctor, but this is over." Estelle stood. "I'll resign, but I want it on record that I did the right thing." "The record will show you resigned for personal reasons." She walked out. October 1st, 1943. Estelle sat in her empty apartment packing boxes. Her career was over. She'd been erased from the health department as if she'd never existed. The newspapers had moved on to other stories. Harvey Dalton wrote one follow-up piece praising her courage, but it was buried on page 8. The doorbell rang. She opened it to find Dottie Pritchard standing there, holding a cloth bundle. "Dr. Vogel, I heard what happened, that you lost your job." "News travels fast." "I wanted to thank you. Nina came home from the hospital yesterday. She's weak, but she's alive. The doctors said if you hadn't found the poison, she'd be dead within a week. I'm glad she's recovering. They said the poisoning was so bad she might never have children. But the doctors are hopeful. With time, with care, maybe." Dottie's eyes filled with tears. __quote _112 ___. She pressed the bundle into Estelle's hands. "I knitted this for you, a scarf, for the winter. It's not much, but you saved my daughter-in-law. You saved all of us. We won't forget." Estelle unwrapped it. A warm woolen scarf, hand-knitted, simple but made with care. "Thank you. I'll cherish it." Dottie crossed herself. "God bless you, dear, for speaking the truth when no one else would." October 15th, 1943. Estelle received a letter. Official. On letterhead from the U.S. Public Health Service. They were offering her a position in Washington. Senior epidemiologist. Salary, housing, career advancement opportunities. She sat in her Pittsburgh apartment holding the letter, thinking. Washington. Important work. A chance to influence policy on a national scale. A chance to prevent future tragedies. The next day, she called Washington and accepted. Before leaving, she drove to Maple Ridge one last time. The street was quiet. The houses stood boarded up, abandoned. People had been relocated to neighborhoods with city water. The wells were filled in, surrounded by warning signs. Silence. Estelle stopped at number 18, where Dottie had lived. The yard was empty. She stood there, remembering that first day when she'd come here. Then she didn't know what it would become. Didn't know what she'd have to go through. As she turned to leave, she saw a woman walking down the street. Dottie. The old woman carried a bag of belongings. "Dr. Vogel!" She approached, embraced her. "You came to say goodbye?" "I'm leaving for Washington. New job." "I heard. They wrote about it in the paper. You'll do important work there. You deserve it." "How's Nina?" "Getting stronger every day. Slow but steady. We're in a new place now. They gave us an apartment with running water, can you imagine? Hot and cold, right from the tap. Nina says it's like living in a palace." Estelle smiled. "That's wonderful." Dottie reached into her bag, pulled out a small photograph. "Here, keep this, to remember us." It was a picture of Nina, pale but smiling, standing in front of their new apartment building. "Thank you," Estelle said, her throat tight. "I will." They stood in silence. Then Dottie made the sign of the cross over Estelle. "May God protect you, child, for speaking truth when it would have been easier to stay silent." November 1943. Estelle sat in a train car heading from Pittsburgh to Washington. Fields, towns, forests flashed past the window. She was traveling to a new job, a new life. In her pocket was Dottie's photograph and the hand-knitted scarf. Simple things, but they meant everything. They were proof that what she'd done mattered, that the struggle, the fear, the sacrifice, they had saved lives. In Washington, public health service representatives met her, showed her to a new apartment, 2 rooms in Georgetown, showed her an office, large, bright, with a view of the Potomac, gave her a stack of files to work on. Estelle sat at her desk, opened the first folder. Complaint from residents of Gary, Indiana regarding air pollution from steel mills. She picked up her pen, began reading. There was much work ahead, but she was ready. Several years passed. Estelle Vogel became one of the Public Health Service's leading specialists in environmental safety. Thanks to her work, oversight standards for industrial facilities were tightened nationwide. Hundreds of factories across the country were forced to build treatment systems. Dozens of managers lost their positions for violating health regulations. She rose to Assistant Surgeon General. A methodology for early detection of industrial contamination was named after her. Medical schools studied quote, _128 as an example of professional courage and ethical responsibility. The Maple Ridge neighborhood was eventually rebuilt with proper infrastructure: city water, sewage systems, paved streets. Families moved back. Children played in yards that were no longer poisoned. Theodore Carver was convicted of criminal negligence and served 3 years in federal prison. Whitmore Chemical never reopened. The site was eventually decontaminated and converted into a public park. But what mattered most to Estelle was something else entirely. Spring 1962. Estelle, now 51 years old and Deputy Surgeon General of the United States, sat in her Washington office reading correspondence. Among the letters was one that made her stop. The envelope was worn, the handwriting shaky. It was from Pittsburgh. Quote, 129, quote, it began. Quote, 130, quote, my daughter-in-law Nina recovered fully, as you know. The doctors were wrong. She was able to have children after all. She has 2 beautiful daughters now, ages 17 and 14. The older one, her name is Estelle. Nina named her after you. Quote, 131 __. I wanted you to know that what you did all those years ago, it didn't just save our lives that one time. It changed us. It showed us that one person can make a difference, that the truth matters more than being comfortable or keeping your job. Nina tells young Estelle stories about you, about the brave doctor who wouldn't stay silent, who fought the powerful people to save ordinary folks like us. Those stories are part of our family now, part of who we are. Thank you, Dr. Vogel. Thank you for being the kind of person worth naming a child after. With eternal gratitude, Dottie Pritchard. Estelle read the letter twice, then a third time. Her eyes blurred with tears. She stood, walked to her window. Outside, the Potomac River flowed past, cherry trees bloomed along the mall, people hurried about their business. An ordinary spring day in the capital. But for Estelle, this day was extraordinary, because she understood now, truly understood, what her choice in 1943 had meant. She hadn't just exposed a crime. She hadn't just saved 12 people from poisoning. She had planted a seed that had grown into a young woman named Estelle who wanted to help people, who wanted to speak truth, who would carry forward the fight for justice into a new generation. That evening, Estelle sat at her desk and wrote a reply to Dottie. Dear Mrs. Pritchard, of course I remember you. I remember Nina. I remember your kindness. I remember the scarf you knitted for me. I still have it, worn thin now from 19 winters, but I keep it because it reminds me why I do this work. I am deeply honored that Nina named her daughter after me. Please tell young Estelle that she has already made me proud by choosing a path of service. The world needs nurses and doctors and public health workers who care more about doing what's right than doing what's easy. Tell her that the fight I fought in 1943 isn't over. It will never be over. There will always be powerful people who put profit before people, who hide the truth to protect themselves, who count on ordinary folks staying quiet. Quote 136. Tell her to be one of those people. The world is changed by them, one act of courage at a time. Quote 137. She sealed the letter, addressed it, and set it aside to mail in the morning. Then she opened the next file on her desk. A complaint about pesticide contamination in California farm worker housing. Children were getting sick. The growers denied responsibility. Local authorities were looking the other way. Estelle picked up her pen. The work continued. Years later, in the archives of the U.S. Public Health Service, researchers found a thick file labeled __quote _138__. It contained medical records, test results, interrogation transcripts, newspaper clippings. At the very end, in the __quote _139__ section, was a single sentence written in Estelle Vogel's own hand. Public health cannot be held hostage to political interests. A doctor who remains silent about truth is not a doctor, but an accomplice to crime. This phrase was quoted in medical ethics textbooks for decades. Medical students repeated it during their professional oaths. It became an unofficial motto for those who chose the profession of healing. The story of how one woman in an industrial city challenged the system and won became legend. A legend that even in the darkest times, people exist who are capable of speaking truth. No matter what. That one voice can change the world. Even if that world doesn't want to change. Even if that voice must pay with career, peace, safety. Because there are things more precious than safety. There is truth. There is conscience. There are human lives that can be saved. And there are the children who will hear these stories, who will carry them forward, who will choose courage over comfort. As long as such people exist, hope never dies. Never. In 1965, a young nurse named Estelle Pritchard graduated from the University of Pittsburgh nursing program. At the ceremony, she was awarded the Vogel Medal for Ethics in Public Health, an honor established by Dr. Estelle Vogel herself to recognize students who demonstrated exceptional commitment to truth and justice in healthcare. The original doctor. Vogel attended the ceremony. She was 64 years old now, soon to retire from government service. She stood on the stage and watched as young Estelle walked up to receive her medal. Their eyes met. The older woman and the younger. The doctor who had fought the fight, and the nurse who would carry it forward. No words were needed. Everything was understood. The torch had been passed.